Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I would just like to do some brief housekeeping. This is a recorded webinar, which means that the webinar will be available for viewing hopefully later this evening, if not tomorrow. If you have any questions, please email me if you cannot watch the webinar after it has been published. If you would like to turn on the closed captions, you can do so by going onto the bottom tab of Zoom, and you can chat with each other, and we encourage you to also engage with us. And you can ask questions in Q&A, and if you want to ask your questions anonymously, you're welcome to do so as well in our Q&A section. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Julia. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Belma. And if we can go to the first slide.
I think we may be on some of the slides that were submitted over by one of the IESC members that's going to be joining us to talk in just a little while. You're getting a preview that we are going to be returning back to the Civil Executive. I am sorry to all of my Swedish speakers out there. We talked about it during the last EDGE user group, that professional exam. Well, this is one of the slides that we're going to be showing you later that has information on that Civil Konexamen. Basically, today, thank you all for joining us here at the EDGE user group. We're going to get started in just a minute with everything about who is on the IESC. Julia, would you like to chat just a little bit about who the IESC is?
Sure. So you're going to see a slide in a few minutes here of all the IESC members. The chair of that committee is Jasmine Saidi Cunert, and she is also the president of ACEI, and she leads this wonderful group of members and observers every 2 weeks in a discussion about what's going on with EDGE, and they do research and follow up on things. She will be joining us today, as well as Emily Tsay, who's on the IESC, and Shelby Kearley, who's on the IESC. If we have anybody else jump in from the IESC, we'll alert you to their participation as well. I will tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and say, Velma, why don't we just start with the poll, if we have that ready. See if we have that ready. And Shelby and Emily and Jasmine, I'll have you come off camera in just a minute and we'll introduce you. But while we're doing the poll, you see that this poll, we do it every month. So this month is no different. We have 3 questions for you. One is, are you an EDGE subscriber? We hope you are. If not, we hope this makes you decide to be an EDGE subscriber. 2, is this your first user group? And 3, what segment do you represent? Where are you joining us from? Are you an institutional staff member? Are you at a college or university? Are you on an evaluation services staff? Are you a government member? Perhaps a law firm? So just take a moment and think about those things. And there behind us, we see the IESC. So take a moment and go ahead and look at those. Your trivia to for the day while you're filling those out is, this was the day in 1959 that The Sound of Music premiered. We don't have a poll question here to say if you've ever seen The Sound of Music. You can chat about that in the chat, though, if you like. How are we doing with our poll? Wonderful, done. All right, good news. 55 of you out of 61, or 90%, are EDGE subscribers. The other 6, we hope you decide that EDGE is maybe something you want to subscribe to in the near future. Is this your first EDGE user group? Well, this is interesting, isn't it, guys? Normally we have a lot of people who have been here many, many times before, but 25% of you, 15 of you, this is your first EDGE user group. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. The rest of you have been here before. And what segment of do you represent? Well, a whopping 95% of you are from an institution. That's fantastic. We are so glad you're here. And the rest of you are from an evaluation service. Welcome. And let's go ahead and we can close that poll. and go on to our next slide.
So Julia, before we go too far along here, you know, I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child. Did y'all have a set whistle in your household for when all of you were supposed to, you know, perform different chores?
No, I'm one of 7, so from a big family. So I usually would hear everybody else's name called before mine. And like many families, if the middle name was also used, you knew it was serious. So, you know, if I got a Julia Ann, I knew I better come running. But no whistle.
No whistle.
And we didn't sing that well together either.
Well,
anyhow.
Yeah, I didn't figure, but since you had that wonderful little trivia piece, I was hoping that you would have a little song to whistle for us. But that's okay. Too much to hope for sometimes.
No, and I really like Shelby's comment in the chat. She is the second of 9, and father being a drill sergeant, she knew when to come.
Well, the ISC comes and we meet every couple of weeks to talk about this. I'll let you get back to your introduction. I'll step out of your way. Well,
you're fine. You're fine. I just talked about the IESC a little bit, but now you see the diversity of people who are on the IESC, and ACRO is very, very lucky to have this group who dedicates their time, their energy, and their immense skills and background in credential evaluation to making EDGE better, stronger, faster. And they really do go through it, and they look at credentials and talk about updating them and giving us the advice. And so what you see each month on this EDGE user group is really what they've worked on that month. There's usually much more that they've worked on, but we can only fit so many things in, and many things are in the process of being reviewed. So we go through that as well. But so we are grateful to have them here, and you all benefit from their expertise. At this point, I am going to turn it over to you, Drew, and you can tell us about the agenda for today. You're muted, Drew.
I'm muted right now. As you already got your little preview, we are going to be talking about Sweden in just a little while, but we're also going to be talking about a couple of different professional degrees out of Nigeria. Some of you may see the B Farm more, some of you may see the Farm D more. Some of you may be like me and are so frustrated that they can't always agree across the entire world that Bachelor of Pharmacy, the B is always going to be at the beginning, and the Doctor of Pharmacy, the D is always going to be at the end. I would love some consistency, but we will give you some tips for how to better understand those two credentials. We'll go down to Bolivia for a little while, talk about a Titulo that's offered there. I've already messed up the Swedish pronunciation twice, last time as well as this time. We are going to go into a discussion about that professional credential as well. And it came from an EDGE user question where we had given you information on the Lesotho General Certificate of Secondary Education, the GCSE from Lesotho, but we didn't give you a grading scale. We did some research, and we'll talk about some research methodology and how to go about finding that information, maybe when you come across some conflicting pieces. So, and we'll tell you some of what's going on within ACRO. 95% of you are institutional subscriber or are institutional folks. And if you are already an ACRO member, just a reminder that we're going to be transitioning over to the ACRO Exchange next month, which is going to be a great place to have conversations. It's going to be replacing the International Activities Group, the International Activities Listserv. So this is going to be a members-only benefit. If you are with an evaluation agency, you can, of course, become an ACRO member as well. But that community is going to be just with ACRO members, and we'll be reinforcing all the best practices, like how you need to redact all of the information when you send in any documents to be reviewed by the IESC, things like that. But I mention all that to say we'll talk about that later. For now, let's go to Nigeria.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Belma. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jasmine, and I am right now trying to emulate and mimic Robert our dear friend Robert Watkins, who serves with us on the IASC. He did the extensive research on these 2 credentials in pharmacy from Nigeria. Unfortunately, he's not able to join us today, so I am going to step in and try and give you an overview of these 2 credentials. What we used to see, and we still continue, is the Bachelor of Pharmacy, B-Pharm, a 5-year a credential that allows the individuals to practice pharmacy in Nigeria. But what we have also seen is the introduction of a 6-year program, and this was it took place sometime in the 2000s. And this 6-year degree leads to the title of Doctor of Pharmacy. Based on some news reports that I was just scanning, as of October 2022, 23 universities in Nigeria are offering both the B-Pharm and the PharmD. So the B-Pharm has not been phased out yet, but you will see these 2 variations. The one thing that we believe the D-Pharm was introduced is to replicate the American pharmacy, Doctor of Pharmacy degree by making it a 6-year program. It does indicate that they do require an additional, kind of a much more of a deeper dive into pharmaceutical care and clinical, but the Bachelor of Pharmacy also has a clinical component. Our result of our discussion about these 2 credentials was to recognize both of them as the first professional degrees in pharmacy. And the reason for that is a holder of a Bachelor of Pharmacy or the holder of a Doctor of Pharmacy are allowed to practice the profession as a pharmacist in Nigeria. And the body that makes that decision is the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria. Previously it was known as the Pharmacist Council of Nigeria. And just to throw a monkey wrench into all of this, in our just very recent research, we found that there is also a 2-year diploma in pharmacy. So we will be also evaluating, reviewing that for consideration to be included in EDGE. But what I can tell you is that the 2-year diploma in pharmacy is known as a D-Pharm. So don't confuse if you see that the D-Pharm is different than the PharmD. The Pharmacy Council of Nigeria is also noted that based on the person's experience, and they put that in quotes, senior professionals who hold the diploma in pharmacy may be also eligible for professional practice. But for today, we're only going to focus on the Bachelor of Pharm and the Doctor of Pharm, both recognized as first professional degrees when, and they can also seek professional licensure in the US to be determined by the appropriate licensing boards. So that's it. Thank you. I hope I did Robert well on this one.
Jasmine, I'm sure that Robert would have really appreciated how you were able to do that, as well as weave in an opportunity to just needle me a little bit with that extra D in front of another different degree, diploma, certificate, credential.
I know. I'm sorry, Drew. You started it, so that's where it went.
You just had to finish it. Shelby, I'm gonna let you go and talk about Bolivia for a second.
All right. Well, we're continuing the pharmacy journey. This time we're in Bolivia in South America. We have added the credential Título de Licenciado or Título de Licenciada, since it's gender specific, in Bioquímica y Farmacia, so the title of licentiate in biochemistry and pharmacy. This credential is a first level undergraduate degree that is the first professional degree in pharmacy, and it allows students to practice as a pharmacist in Bolivia. It also gives them access to additional further higher education if they so choose. The entrance requirement for this credential is usually going to be the bachiller, but you could also enter either through a técnico or perito certificate. So you have various secondary, academic, or technical vocational pathways into this program. It's not as detailed as the research that Robert provided, so it's pretty short and sweet. Just wanted to let you know that this new credential has been added.
Hello, everyone. So now we will be heading over to Sweden. And in last month's webinar, we did give a preview that the council was working on the, I'm going to butcher this too. I don't think I'm going to be any better than Drew, but the Civilekonomexamen, which is one of the economics degrees available in Sweden. And there was some conflicting information that was identified. But in terms of its current offering, it is, I'm so sorry, I have I need to move everyone's faces so I can see the full slide. It is 240 points, which is similar or compatible with ECTS credits. So you have 60 credits for 1 year of full-time study. Pre-Bologna, however, it was locally 160 credits or POANG because it was 40 credits for 1 year of full-time study. So we were just sort of scratching the surface and giving a preview at the last webinar. So this time we do have it fully researched and presented in EDGE now. If we can go on to the next slide. Excellent. So the issue really was that in EDGE, it was listed as 3 years in length. However, the EDGE user found that the ones that that person came across, it was 4 years, and it even said 4 years in this sample document with the diploma supplement. It's important to clarify this because it does, of course, impact the credential advice. So, for example, typically for these 3-year degrees here, in this context, we tend to recommend credit for 3 years of undergraduate study, whereas if it's a full 4-year degree, then we would normally recommend a U.S. bachelor's degree equivalency. So it was really important to get to the bottom of this. So then on to the next slide, please. So what we did was we just looked at other resources to see what they were saying. Unfortunately, the conflicting information did continue, so there was a bit of a smackdown there. The 1995 peer workshop report identified it as 4 years in length, whereas the country index identified it as 3 years in length. What was helpful, however, was that both resources indicated that this degree, the Civilekonomexamen, was offered at Stockholm School of Economics. So that was really helpful in trying to, in giving direction on where to dig further. On to the next slide. Because the issue is, what do you do when there is conflicting information? You do have to check other resources, you just keep digging and excavating, if you will. But what's really important, what carries more weight is if you go to primary resources. So what do I mean by primary sources? Going directly to the school website, or the Ministry of Education, any of their publications or websites, that sort of thing. Those are considered primary sources, and they would definitely bear more weight compared to other resources, which may just be referencing other pre-existing publications, right? So then they're perpetuating that information. So what was beautiful about the Stockholm School of Economics was that several years ago, they were celebrating their 110-year anniversary and happened to provide this detailed timeline in English, no less. So I didn't have to use Google Translate. So I was very happy. On to the next slide. And so in terms of the findings, what they did was they included information about the Civilekonomexamen because it was a signature degree for the Stockholm School of Economics. So if we go back to 1993, what happened was the economics degree was known as the Ekonomexamen, and it was usually 3 to 3.5 years in length. And in 1993, the Stockholm School of Economics decided to extend it to 4 years in length and then rebrand it as the Civilekonomexamen. Why did they do that? Why did they change the length of the name? It's to give it gravitas and have it as a more professionally oriented degree. So that was the idea behind that. So we have established that it's 4 years in length for the Civilekonomexamen. But what was interesting is then that you fast forward to 2007, and what's happening at that time, they're in, full speed, Bologna harmonization. So what happens is Stockholm School of Economics decides to embrace the Bologna harmonization. And so they scale their economics degree back to 3 years and call it the Candidat examen with a major in economics, like all the other institutions, because again, the idea is harmonization. So they adopt the nomenclature Candidat examen, translated in English as the bachelor degree, and they make it 3 years in length. So that was that, but when you talk about the Seville economic examen, it's 4 years. So everyone stay with me, a little bit more detail here. So if we can go on to the next slide. So what was previously Stockholm School of Economics branded degree, the Seville economic examen, which is 4 years. Again, they do the Bologna process. It's changed to 3 years. It's Candidat examen. Now, what's happening is at that same time, around 2007 or so, other Swedish universities decide to embrace the 4-year Seville economic examen. So they then adopt it. So the Seville economic examen does not die when the Stockholm School of Economics changes to the 3+2 Bologna cycle degrees, because other Swedish universities then take on the 4-year Seville economic examen. And that explains why we have this sample document from the EDGE user from Linköping University, which is 4 years, again, for the Seville economic examen. On to the next slide. Are we able to get to hopefully the next slide, because that's going to sort of sum it up for us all.
So, Emily, just a second ago, you said that Sweden did the Bologna process, but earlier you said the credits were compatible with ECTS.
So that's for the current, yes. So it's just that their local native degrees are called the higher education credits, and I can't do the Swedish, but it's
yeah.
Here we go, Högskolepoäng. And so it's 60 credits per year, but their local terminology is Högskolepoäng, but it's the same thing as ECTS credits. So they call it, so we say it's compatible with ECTS credits.
So that degree supplement's not going to say ECTS, it's going to have whatever the Swedish credits are, but.
So the diploma supplement that we received from the EDGE user, yeah, actually does indeed say Högskolepoäng. But depending, I think, on the school, they might just translate it or use the terminology ECTS credit. But the one the EDGE user gave did say Högskolepoäng, and that is the local terminology.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I think we have up the summarized slide that has the 3-year, the 4-year, as well as the 1 and 2. Is that the one you were looking for?
Yes, that sums it all for everyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, the bottom line, solving that mystery for the Seville economic examen, it's 4 years, whether it's pre-Bologna, post-Bologna, pre-Stockholm School of Economics, or post-Stockholm School of Economics. It's going to be 4 years. And if you're talking post-Bologna, then it's 240 credits. But if it's pre-Bologna, it's going to be the 120 I talked about, because it was just a different credit system back then. I listed the other Swedish economics degrees because I wanted to make sure that they aren't confused or conflated with others. So as I mentioned, there is now, because of the Bologna process, the 3-year Candidat examen with the major in economics. And what's important to know is that they often refer to that in English as the Bachelor of Science in Business and Economics, but the Seville economic examen, which is 1 year longer, is often referred to as a master's degree in Business and Economics. But there are also other degrees that they often translate as master's degree as well, which is why I'm listing it here, not to drive you all crazy. But there's also the 1-year Magister examen in economics and the 2-year master examen. That's part of that 3+2 Bologna cycle sequence. The 2-year master examen with a major in economics. So those last 3 that's on this list here, they are all translated in English as a master's degree in economics or business and economics, which again further drives home the point that it's really important to be able to refer to the degree in the native language so we know exactly what we're talking about. And then we know that, yes, this is why this is 4 years, or this is 2 years, or maybe it's really a 4-year degree, but they transferred in after 2 years from another. So it's really important to have that understanding of the local terminology, because there are different degrees that are referred to as master's degrees in economics and in English. So hopefully I haven't made it more confounding. The attempt here was to make it clear rather than the opposite for everyone. But mystery solve, civil economic examen, 4-year, and that's how it's reflected in Edge now. So thank you to that Edge user. On to the next slide.
Just one thing, it is
Yes.
about to be reflected within Edge as
Oh,
that. For anyone
sorry.
that visits today, I just want to let you know that all of that wonderful information is not yet reflected, but it will be. This is one of those things that even when we haven't put it all the way in there, we like to let you guys know some of what's coming down the pike.
Yeah, it's been all approved. It's official in terms of the IESC, and it's just a matter of pushing it out and publishing it on Edge. Thank you, Drew, for that correction. So that was Sweden. Now we're in Lesotho, and the General Certificate of Secondary Education, or the LGCSE. So this credential was actually introduced in Lesotho in 2014, and we did update it in Edge. What a user pointed out, however, was that the grading scale for the LGCSE was not shown in Edge. So we had to do some digging around to make sure that the correct information is placed there. And so it's been established that the grading scale is A star through G. When you look at the back of the examination certificate, the information is quite limited, just that A star is the highest and G is the lowest. So we don't really get a full sense of what those letters between A star and G represent performance-wise, right? So again, you have to do some digging. Onto the next slide, please. And so when the resources, the information is limited, what do you do? So in this case, because the LGCSE is a high school level credential, what we did was we went and looked at university websites to see what the minimum entrance requirement would be as far as the LGCSE is concerned. There are not many higher education institutions in Lesotho, but we were able to look at the websites of 2 public institutions and 2 private institutions, with National University of Lesotho being the premier university. So when as you can see here with Leratholi Polytechnic, apologies again, this is an institution that has applied bachelor's degrees, for example, the Bachelor of Technology, and certificate programs and diploma programs. And so they require at minimum subject passes with a minimum of an E grade. So with this, we would infer that E is the lowest passing minimum grade. All the other institutions seem to require a minimum of a D grade, so that appears, we infer that D would be a standard pass, whereas E is the lowest passing grade, D is a standard pass. Again, I mentioned National University of Lesotho is the premier university, so they may be a little bit more stringent in their requirements, and you do see here that they do require a certain percentage of subjects with a minimum grade of C. So we know that C is a strong pass, especially in comparison to a D and an E. Now, these examples here, it's important to note that they can vary by program of study, right? So it's not all across the board that you need, for example, for both a university, 5 subjects with a minimum grade of D. It can vary by program, but this is just a snapshot, if you will. So this does give us an idea in terms of the relationship between the C, D, and E grades. And so onto the next slide, we did do more scratching and digging, and we did find this grading scale for the LGCSE with the NCAA guide, the National Collegiate Athletic Association. It's a great resource. It's free, so you can, if you're not familiar with it, you can download that guide, because it has the grading scales for secondary level credentials for countries around the world. And in fact, Robert Watkins, who's a member of the IAC, whom Jasmine was trying to channel earlier, he was the chair of the International Academic Standards Committee for a number of years previously. In any event, when we look at the grading scale provided by NCAA, it does align with what our findings were, right? So again, you see with the C, D, and E, the D is a strong C, strong pass grade, which we make a C. E is the lowest passing, so we would also make that a C. So the conversion here that's provided or suggested by NCAA aligns with what we find, and so this is what we ended up using for EDGE. So that's the LG CSE grading scale. And that's it on my end.
Emily, that's fun. I like hearing how you were able to look at something that had incomplete information and trace it back by looking at the information at various primary sources, going to those websites, looking through the programs. Like, having that kind of step-by-step explanation is really helpful for me when I don't know how to do something. And I'm sure for anyone out there that didn't know, that's going to be really useful. And I'm going to reference back to this video at some point in the future when others need some of that advice on how to put together a grading scale. Just
Yeah.
before we move on, do you have any other thoughts that, you know, people should really keep in mind? I find that verbal descriptors can be confusing, but also really help me understand what's happening within the mindset of who came up with that grading scale. You might not have anything, but I'm just going to put you right on the spot.
Oh no, well, I think for the Swedish case and the Lesotho case, what's really key is relying as much as possible on primary sources. Again, the actual schools themselves, the Ministry of Education, and understanding what it is, what it represents in the context of that educational system. So in that example with the grading scale, going back and saying, okay, what do the universities in that country then require at minimum for eligibility for entry? So it's doing that kind of excavation that will build the picture that enables one to make sound comparability statements.
That's excellent. Thank you, Emily. And Belma, thank you for going ahead and putting up some information here on the International Institute, which is something that's going to be taking place in Washington, D.C. I believe my colleague, David Mahali, has joined us as well. David, would you like to speak on this for a little bit, or you want me to talk about the International Institute?
Drew, I'm ready and able. Thank you. As you can see, the International Institute is back in person for the second one in a row. The dates are February 4th through 9th. That's a Sunday through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, Wednesday, it looks like. And the venue has changed from the Royal Sonesta. It's now going to be at Yours Truly Hotel in DC. That's the name of the hotel, Yours Truly Hotel in DC, full name. And in addition to all the reasons why this is a good idea, the content matter is going to be quite expanded. Going through foundations and principles of comparative education and credential evaluation. I'm going to have countries from East Asia represented, Vietnam and China, Anglophone and Francophone Africa, a lot of material there, plus South Asia, which in this case we're referring to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Education is in flux in the first 3 of those countries specifically, with India, Pakistan having new systems that are being implemented over quite a long time period. Bangladesh also having some changes, and of course there are some things going on in Nepal. So we hope that if you are able to attend, this is an in-person event, that you will get the information to your bursars or whoever is responsible for approving that funding, and we hope to see you then. Drew, that does it for the International Institute as far as I know.
All right. Well, you got a little bit of a preview earlier when I was mentioning the Acro Exchange. Just one more reminder, I'm going to call it mid-December, but you'll lose access to the International Activities Group, and all that functionality will be shifting over to the Acro Exchange. It's not just international conversations that take place there. For those of you that wear multiple hats, you'll find all kinds of interesting discussions taking place within those communities. And it's fun just to see what people are chatting about sometimes. When you have things that you can contribute, it's always useful to add that in. Just like when you find things that should be edited or added to EDGE, it's very useful when you send those things in. one of the things that that we run into from a technical perspective is that websites around the world are frequently not consistently connected to their servers are not consistently connected every time I try to go visit it. And so we may get a notification that a link is broken, but it's not actually broken. It's just that we couldn't access it at that time. And so we have not found a better way to identify when a link is truly broken than when we hear from you guys. So all that to say, on every page within Edge, there's a contact us button, and you can let us know. Oh, thank you, Wendy. That is a great one. Down for everyone or just me? Is it down right now? There's a few of those types of sites that allow you to check out, put in a website, and someone else will do that check to see if maybe it's your computer, because it might be yours. If you ever run into issues with any website, including Acro Edge, it's amazing how frequently clearing the cookies off of that site or from all sites will resolve some issues. It is, the internet equivalent of turning it off and turning it back on again. But anywho, think about the Exchange. You'll log in and you'll be able to access all that information and all those different communities. Thelma, could we go to the next slide? Just one more thing to remember. We did switch over prices within Edge. If you received an invoice at the previous rate, yeah, pay that one. We're not going to ask you for more money for an invoice that has already been generated. But moving forward, please do take into account that this is what the cost is going to be. So for those of you those 95% of you working in institutions, I know that sometimes your budgets have to be set up a year or two in advance. Reach out to us if you are experiencing any issues, if your budget has already been set. We understand some of those limitations that you might be encountering. And on the next slide, if you have encountered things in your research and they are no longer a limitation for you, they are now a source of strength that you can articulate and explain to people. We want you to help communicate that out. Consider applying for some research funds from the Gloria R. Nathanson grant. It's something that for those of you that enjoy doing research, and I would say that's more than 95% of you in this room, it is an opportunity to cut away some of those costs associated with research. I know we're going to get to a couple of questions here. Dave, Julia, have we seen any questions come in that we're kind of ready to work on right now?
Yes, we have. We have 2 questions that have come in so far. I'm going to start with the lower one. For places like Lesotho and more generally the British providers, we know the pass is of 40%, but my university will only accept a grade of C or above, ignoring the passes. How do we honor the sending system, especially for course-by-course undergrad admissions? Anybody want to take the first stab at that? Or maybe we have somebody.
I can try, and if I'm off the
Great.
mark, then perhaps the attendee can come off mute and
Oh, sorry.
okay, so I think I understand what you're asking. So the pass is generally 40%, sometimes it's a little bit lower, but they will still receive a grade, a numeric grade of like 40 to 49 generally, because the pass is not the grade that they earn. The pass is the descriptor or the classification usually. And so that generally means that it's a pass class. So it's kind of like a first class, a second class uppers, second class lower, pass class. And sometimes there may not be a pass class. It might be called third class. But I would consider the numeric grade rather than the descriptor grade. And if I'm off the beam, somebody step in and correct me. We get a number of British patterned credentials, and we will often see the classification or descriptor and the numeric grade. So we will use the numeric grade and then use that classification or descriptor to determine the letter grade equivalent on our own grading scale equivalency. So it's not that it's a pass-fail class, it is a graded class. So you should be able to consider that for transfer credit kind of a thing, because our institution also has a policy where they have to have a grade of C or better in order to transfer in the class.
Shelby, is this a perfect example of how to apply some of what Emily was talking about
Yes.
earlier? With you go and you see what actually allows entry into that school.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example.
Okay.
And also, this is an instance where you would want to be doing that research, because you would want to go look up, say, the undergraduate degree assessment regulations. That's normally how British pattern schools call them, because usually places like just earlier today before the webinar started, I was having to look that up for postgraduate taught degrees for Bangor University in Wales, because there was a discrepancy on the transcript about whether a particular course was passed or not, because it was for an MBA program, and generally that's a 50% or above for passing. And it even says that on the transcript that we received, but this person had like a 48, I think it was, and still received credit and did not have to repeat this subject in order to actually get the degree. So we had to go look for those regulations to determine, is there some kind of condoned pass? And buried on page like 23 of 46 of the regulations for that year, it says that students within a particular range of slightly below 50 are allowed to pass if they have an overall average of 50 or better. So
Oh, I think I remember something about that. There's some kind of similar relationship with some French pattern grading.
oh yes, condoned or conceded passes, everybody's favorite.
So that's one of those times that you really have to know the deep down nitty gritty about, is this an exception to the generally known rule? And it sounds like, yes, there are those little things. For everyone out there that uses Edge, when we are aware about those condoned passes, that is reflected as an author note on the grading scale. That's one of the tabs there. That is useful information. Like, Shelby, if you had known that was existing in that system, how much time might you have saved rather than having to go through and do all that additional digging down?
About 37 minutes.
37.
Yep.
That's pretty good. I could do a lot with 37 minutes.
I could have too.
Dave, you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, since Shelby led us to the gates of perdition with the condoned pass, I suspect that this is an issue where the concept of the D, not, the US D grade not applying in the British system might be relevant. Many times we see 40% being the lower cutoff for pass class or third class in British system educational credentials, and a pass definitely is not something that you need to do over, and it should not be mistaken with a band of 40 to 49 in the US, for example, which would not generally be a passing grade. So when we're pegging our comparability grade ranges in the US to class descriptors, people do it in different ways, but in general, first division or first class, we're calling an A range. The pass range for the purpose of degree classification in the British system, we're usually calling something like the USC range. So it's definitely a passing grade. And then, oftentimes we're dividing up the second class higher and second class lower, or second class, 1, 2, however they divide it up, dividing that into a high B range and maybe a lower B range. But just so that everybody, is aware, a 40 would definitely not be a less than C range in the way many people do that conversion in the US. Everyone does it a different way. There's no agreement amongst evaluators, with 5, 10, 15, 20 going into the 50-year experience range with some of our colleagues here on the IESC. really no firm agreement on exactly how you would break down something individually, but I think there is pretty much an agreement that the pass would, still be a C range. So I'll leave that one for further study and books and seminars and whatever.
Well, so Dave, you mentioned The Gates of Perdition. So Road to Perdition, great Tom Hanks movie if you've never seen it. But what I would emphasize here that what I'm really hearing you say, Dave, is that it's important that everyone comes up with their scale using a justification, a reasoning, and then applying it consistently when they have students coming in that should be applied, that's the grading scale they should be using. I hear sometimes where people are getting pushback where someone needs a certain grade, and to the person that wrote in about this, you are in a good position to explain to whoever's questioning this grade of 52 that does represent what that represents in that native education system. And so I guess my big point is that when you can articulate why this person has a C, when you can articulate why this person has a B in their native system, you really will be able to achieve the appropriate result for that learner.
Right, and we're really able to point to a lot of different kinds of resources. You could point to EDGE, you could point to the old World Education Series volumes or the peer volumes, and find that kind of information on the general trend of thinking in the profession. And of course, there are many private credential agencies that have substantial information online, and they all pretty much will be in let's say broad agreement with differences in how they break down the exact letter grade comparabilities if they go that far as to even list those. But yeah, we're on pretty solid ground. Everybody does the same thing. We all look to a resource to see what somebody has already said and to see if that makes sense for us, and that's how we do it.
And then I did see, Julia, I saw there was one question that came in talking about the grading scale in Sweden and why we decided to use the same grading as the NCAA. There might have been just a little bit of conflation there, because what we found when doing the research for the Lesotho grading scale on the general certificate on the GCSE from Lesotho, we found that so Emily went through and found that relationship between what was allowing entry matched up with what the NCAA scale found as well. And so to go back to elementary math, this was a check of Emily's work, and it was one of those things that further verified that the research that she had done was indeed leading her and others to similar conclusions. The grading scale, we did not talk about that for Sweden. Did I sum that up?
Yes, I think you did. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, but yes, I think that summed it up. It was really in reference to Lesotho. Yeah. We also had a question about the IB. And it was basically saying, where can we find information on the IB system and conversions for the IGSC? We never can find any solid resources for that. There is so much conflicting information out there. There is a lot of information out there, and I'm going to put into the chat. The first thing I would do on this, and I'd love to hear from others, so pipe in, is go to IB. The IB.org has the International Baccalaureate Organization has an incredible website, and what I've just given you there is a PDF where they outline each subject and then the grading that they use and what that grading entails for that particular subject. Now, you're right, there's a ton of concordance tables out there, certainly with the IGSC, certainly with AP and others. I think, yes, and NCAA International Guide has an IB to US grade conversion. They are out there, but I think if you look through that and you decide for your institution, how do we want to concord this? That's really the best way to go about it. Does a grade of 3 in higher level English literature meet the criteria that you would look for in a passing grade, a C or better at your institution? So even though that's a little bit more laborious, I think it would give you a really good idea, especially if you have a number of IB students who apply. How about the rest of you? Any other suggestions? An IB concordance?
No, I would agree with what's been shared. Where possible in terms of best practice, you just want to go to the source, right? Again, primary sources. So this is the issuing body, the IBO, to see how they define those grades. And luckily they do have this full PDF where they have that information. We didn't have that luxury with Lesotho. But if you're looking for suggested conversion schemes, then the NCAA International Academic Standards Guide is one possibility, one place to go, if it's not an EDGE.
And you're not tooting your own horn, but Shelby put in a presentation that you worked on a while ago, Emily, that includes information on developing those grading scales. So that might be another good place.
I cannot tout that presentation enough. I think that was what, 2012-ish, I think. And I actually use that when I'm training new evaluators on my staff, because one of the hardest things to teach them is, okay, we have a lot of grading scale information already, but you're always going to be finding new scales or scales that don't match what we currently have. And so how can you determine what that equivalency should be? Well, you need to know what type of grading system they're using. What do the descriptors actually mean, et cetera. And I think that presentation actually does a really nice job in an easy to understand way, spelling it out so that you can figure out how to make those determinations yourself.
Thanks, Shelby. So again, it just goes back to trying to understand it within the context of the local system.
I think, let's see if we have, we do have one more question. We may need some clarification on this. And the question is simply, would the 3-year plus the 1 year equal US equivalent of bachelor? I think that actually came in when we were talking about Sweden. Is that right, Wendy? Is that what you want to know about? Is that what your question is in reference to, or is it a broader question? Yes. Okay. So Emily, would the 3-year plus the 1 year equal US bachelor equivalent?
So Belma, is it possible to go back to the slide with the different economics degrees of modern day Sweden? So the answer to Wendy's question is it depends, right? So that's the popular answer or response in the world of credential evaluation. So the issue is that 1 year credential that you're looking at, it's important to look at, okay, so what is required to get the minimum requirement to get into that 1 year program? What does it give access to? Where is it taken? For example, is it at a university, that sort of thing. So in the example of the third credential, the 1 year Magister examen with a major in economics, that does require the 3-year, at minimum, the 3-year Kandidat examen to get in. This 1 year Magister examen does give access to doctoral study in Sweden. So in this particular situation, the combination would, yes, be used for a US bachelor's degree equivalency. And this is exactly what you'll find reflected in EDGE. So it's really important to identify the components or features of that 1 year credential. What is required to get in? Is it at a university type institution? What does it give access to? Because if a 3-year undergraduate degree is not required for entry, then those two things would not build up for a US bachelor's degree equivalency. So hopefully I'm making sense in that regard.
Yeah. That's why we include the entry requirements for any credential entry that we put into EDGE, because if it only takes a 2-year degree to get in, and then you took a 1 year degree, that is going to be different credential advice than someone that's taking that 180 comparable or compatible with ECTS credits, and then that's 60 compatible credits as well. That, you know, you're gonna have differences based on the actual credentials that someone uses to proceed through the system.
Yeah, and that it might really be vocational in nature. Maybe it's not at a university type institution, all those things. So it's really important to be clear on all those things.
All right. Well, Julia, anything else that we want to talk about today?
I don't see anything else on our Q&A. I would just encourage you, all of you have good questions and things you want to talk about. You know, don't hesitate to come up with ideas for webinars or other topics that you'd like to have us know about. And also, with your questions and any documents you receive, please don't hesitate to send a redacted copy of a document issue that you don't find in Edge or you think needs to be updated. We live for that kind of information. It keeps our agenda full and keeps the IESC busy. That's all I'd add, Drew.
Well, for everyone, really appreciate you joining us. We do this monthly on the third Thursday. I'm going to have to look and see and make sure that there's not going to be any issues next month. If there are any, you'll all receive the communication from ACRO talking about when that will be rescheduled for. But in general, third Thursday of the month. Thanks, everybody.
And one more thing, guys, I will add in this season of gratitude that we are entering, we are thankful for your participation. Please join us next month, as always, and the month after. And it's because of you that we work to make Edge the best possible resource. And we thank our IESC for their valuable dedication, volunteerism, and skill. Thanks all.
Team Pecan Pie here. Au revoir.